Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now back in 2015 AMD launched the R9 FURY X, a $649 high-end graphics card that, had it not been for its built-in liquid cooler, would have been ideal in even the most compact of systems. This little beast was often compared with Nvidia's 980 Ti as far as performance was concerned, but the FURY X was and remains far more interesting in my opinion. It definitely wasn't for everyone, that goes without saying, and the 4GB VRAM limitation imposed by the first generation HBM or high bandwidth memory was one such example of why Nvidia's 6GB Ti alternative may have been a more tempting purchase to those who intended to do all their gaming at higher resolutions. With that said, 4GB of VRAM on a top tier card 7 years ago probably wasn't as much of a deal breaker as it would be today, and this was at one point the best single GPU solution AMD had to offer. In 2022 it's on life support with legacy drivers, if you use the official ones that is, and that makes this one of, if not the best, unsupported graphics card you can buy. Probably not the best idea to purchase one these days then, if you can find one of course, but for the £100 I paid, how could I resist? Let's see how well it holds up. We'll be using the official drivers today, but in another video coming up at some point in the future, we'll be revisiting community made or custom drivers with this thing to see how it does. Okay, so let's throw the R9 FURY X in at the deep end with Cyberpunk 2077. Now I apologise if I just quickly put the overlay on screen. You can see that I've taken away the temperature reading. The reason for that is because I think Afterburner was giving me an inaccurate figure. It was hitting about 35 degrees no matter the game I played, which, despite having the liquid cooler, I just don't think was the case. So unfortunately, I've had to remove that. I couldn't find a way to get an accurate reading, so it's a bit of a shame because of the R9 FURY X, because of what it is. But we do still have all the other metrics like the GPU usage, the VRAM usage, and of course the GPU clock as well. So then, Cyberpunk 2077, apologies if you can also hear the card in the background. Quite a lot of whine coming from this old beast. Cyberpunk 2077, once again, low preset, or the custom preset because everything has been turned down to its respective lowest. I've also gone with balanced FSR 2.1 with 80% sharpening. This won't affect the frame rate, this little sharpening slider thing here. We've also gone with 1080p as a base resolution, so not quite sure where to start, but I think low was a pretty good place. So let's get into the game. Okay, so probably not the best place to load up the game here, right in the busy part of the city. You can see that we're definitely using the low textures. Oops, not my best piece of driving. And the frame rate while driving around the city here, sort of around 45 to 50 FPS, picking up a bit as we get away from those busier areas. Sorry, Mr. Pedestrian. If we just park up nice and neatly here, lovely, and get out of the car, we'll see how the frame rate differs when on foot, because of course Cyberpunk does run better when we are running around outside of our vehicle. We've actually hit over 70 frames per second now, which is quite impressive for this old beast. The card is hitting its max clock of 1050 MHz, and we're using just under 2.5 gigs of VRAM with the usage pinned, lost concentration. The card's running at 100%. Those guys have skulls above them, so if they hit me, I'm dead. Oh no, I'm dead. I decided to try Battlefield 1 next because this is an older game that came out the following year after the FURY X, so it will give you a good idea of how capable this card was. I think it's probably more than capable of using a higher resolution here. In 22 this is certainly a 1080p card, but because of the multiplayer competitive online nature of this one, I have left it at this resolution. The more frames of course you can get online, the better. As far as the advanced settings are concerned, I've gone with the high graphics quality. Whether this is a good idea, well, we'll find out in a moment. Okay, so here we are in Battlefield 1. An enemy vehicle has just driven past. Yes, there we go. We're playing at the high settings. We'll make a quick exit here. Oh, that was risky. But as you can see, over 100 frames per second. Battlefield 1 is still very popular indeed. I actually got this one in a heavily discounted Steam sale. I paid about £4 for it, and I don't think I've found a better bargain in a long time. So yeah, really pleased with that purchase. This particular map is of course running really well, but performance will differ depending on the map you are playing, though it shouldn't differ too much. The single story campaign will also run a little bit better than this too. Multiplayer is generally more demanding, and Conquest with all these players is the most demanding game mode of them all, at least from what I've found. But again, oh, that was close. It does depend on the map you are playing. I think we'll leave this area. I don't want to take the risk of getting blown up. Elden Ring is a bit hit or miss depending on the older graphics card I'm using. Certain GPU architectures can play havoc with this game, and other times it will run perfectly fine. So we'll have to see how the R9 FURY X handles this one at custom high settings. Everything is on high except from depth of field and motion blur. Grass quality is also turned down to medium. I'll have to see how things differ with the custom Nemes drivers that we've tested before. We've tested them a while ago now, and it'll be nice to see how the modern release actually improves things, because before I was seeing a nice improvement in some games. In-game then, and with these settings, well, I'm surprised to see, let's just start the benchmark, that we are sitting close to 60 frames per second. I think high settings was probably a bit of an overestimation as to what the R9 FURY X could do. I think we definitely would have been suited better to medium or low across the board, but here we are, and you know, things really aren't too bad. It's fairly solid. I think the game seems to have ironed itself out a little bit more now, because we are sort of stuck at 60 frames per second, which is the natural cap of this one, and there are only a few little hiccups here and there. Oh, apart from here. Oops. Have they seen me? I don't think... Oh, yes, they have. They've seen me. This will be a test of the frame rate as well as my skill, which I'm quite worried about. Oh, he just... he put his weapon away then, and unfortunately I peeked around the corner once more and he saw me, so... Let's just see if we can wipe these guys out. It's not looking promising. Okay, yeah, what a mess. There we go. Elden Ring, though, a pretty solid performer. In God of War, I thought the most sensible thing to do was to stick with 1080p, as we have been doing so far. FSR2, is available, but it is switched off. In terms of the graphical options, I've gone with the original preset. I think this gives us a look that is most visually similar to the PS4 version of the game, so original seems like a good place to stick with. But let's jump into the game and see how well God of War at 1080p original actually does on the R9 FURY X today. Okay, so we are hitting at least 60 frames per second, which is nice to see. I always say that I could play at 30 frames per second easily. That goes back to the days when I started my gaming adventures on console. I had an Xbox 360 and then eventually a PS3 when it came down in price. And for a long time I played on an AMD APU. So yeah, I mean, I'm used to 20 frames per second even still. It is always nice to hit 60 though. And as you can see, the R9 FURY X, once again exceeding 3 gigs of VRAM, but it is holding this frame rate pretty well. And in some instances it will go above and beyond this figure. You know, this is really quite respectable. For £100, I think this card is doing a fantastic job. I actually won this in an auction on eBay. Buy it now cards are always the easier choice and the quicker choice if you want something instantly, but I find that if you're willing to wait a couple of hours or a couple of days, maybe a week, and bid on an auction listing, you can often find a better bargain, especially with cards like this, because I don't think they're as wanted as they once were, especially ones that are officially legacy status, like the R9 FURY X here. Alright, so here we are in Spider-Man, Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered on PC. AMD FSR 2.1 is available and enabled, set to balanced here. For the graphics, I've gone with the low preset. I think this is probably once again the best bet, but the game still looks absolutely fantastic, as you can see. If we exit the menu now, enable the frame rate overlay, you can see that we're hitting around 48 frames per second, but things should improve here as we make our way out of this particularly busy area, or at least I hope they do. FSR 2.1 really is quite fantastic because you sometimes cannot tell the difference between native res and the upscaled res. That definitely seems to be the case here, and since they added FSR 2.1 to Cyberpunk 2077 as well, it's been a bit of a miracle worker, in fact, for older and weaker hardware. Not APUs though. You might have seen my APU video where the frame rate was actually a little worse, especially with really low end stuff, but that is to be expected. I think the actual visual upgrades you get with FSR 2.1 are worth the performance sacrifices with cars like this, for example, cars that can still do a somewhat decent job. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Certain areas of the city will perform completely different to others. I mean, we're getting over 60 FPS in some instances, and then the game is dropping to like 40, but as usual, I'll have the exact frame rate figures up on screen. I just want to go over to that busier zone again and see how things change. We'll make our way over here. I think the new Spider-Man came out on PC today. I'll be testing it soon, perhaps with a GT 710 or something like that, to see how bad it runs. I think the minimum requirements are the same, but yeah, let's stay on point for now. As you can see, yeah, you know what, it's really not bad at all for the old R9 FURY X here. While I'm waiting for the shaders to optimise in Warzone 2, I'll jump into the settings. It's stuck at 22% at the moment, and it seems to have been stuck like this for 22 minutes at least. I'm using SMAA T2X with high quality anti-aliasing, and the texture resolution is set to normal because using high exceeds the limit. It's not a hard limit, you can exceed it if you want to, but I thought we'd try and remain under this 4070 megabyte number here. Everything else is set to its respective lowest, or if the option is available, it has been switched off. Well, I don't think I had too much to worry about in terms of performance, but I think I certainly chose the right settings. I don't think going any higher than this would have been a good idea, and I think we probably could have gone with the low texture quality, in fact. There are a few stutters, but I have read some issues about optimization with this one, and I think that might have something to do with that, or it could be that the drivers are, of course, outdated. We are seeing over 60 frames per second though, so it's an acceptable level of performance, and it's playable for the most part. There are definitely a few little dips and drops here and there. Let's see if we can find some enemies and wipe them out before they wipe us out. Turns out I didn't manage to wipe anyone else out, they got me first. That does give us a good chance to look at the performance of the Gulag, which performs a lot better, but like I said yesterday, you don't really want to spend too much time in here, so the performance in this segment is sort of irrelevant, I guess, but you do get over 100 frames per second. For Red Dead Redemption 2, I'm using the usual console quality settings, and we are so close to hitting that VRAM limitation here, 3941 out of 4096. As you can see here, the settings textures are on Ultra, and everything else is pretty mixed. Anti-aliasing is TAA, set to medium here. We're using Vulkan, as is standard with these settings, and this gives us a pretty solid looking game indeed. Let's jump into it then and see how these settings affect performance with the almost maxed out FURY X. Well, it seems like the console equivalent settings was certainly a good choice. We are hitting at least 60 frames per second for the time being, though when we venture on into Valentine, it'll be interesting to see if the game can keep it up. Okay, so we are dropping a little bit now, 70 FPS. The game looks very similar to how it does on consoles, of course, at a 1080p resolution. We're getting a few more goings on screen. We're still hitting at least 60. Yeah, this I think is definitely the right choice for the FURY X in terms of the settings to play on. I did not mean to press that button, and now I've just jumped off of my wagon, but let's cause a little bit of carnage around town and see. Why is he shooting me? I don't know what I did. Right, okay, we're gonna have to make a run for it. There we go. Red Dead. It runs fine on this thing. Overall, the Radeon R9 FURY X from 2015 certainly isn't going to be for everyone. It wasn't then, and it certainly isn't going to be now. If you want a small form factor card and you don't mind the included liquid cooler, simply for the fact that you want something a bit cool, a bit unique, then I think if you can find one for as cheap as I did, around about £100 or the equivalent where you live, it could prove to be a pretty solid purchase, especially considering it doesn't just look good, it can still play some modern titles with 60 frames per second as well, and when it can't manage 60 FPS, it can certainly manage at least 30, especially at 1080p. This is probably one of the favourite cards of mine that I've bought. I don't think we've ever tested one before. We've had a look at a couple of Furies, but the FURY X remains fascinating to me, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing what it can do today. If you did, leave a like down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.